So welcome everybody, this is Paul again from VirginiaLandowner.com and this YouTube site. And today I'm going to talk to people who buy homes for the first time. It's a really big process, and a lot of people start that when they're very young, and some people don't even buy a house until very late in life. But it's a big project, and the first time you go through it, it can be very overwhelming. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of helpful information, and maybe I can help make that process a little smoother for you. First of all, today a lot of people go online and they find something, and they may be shopping from another state, but they'll see pictures, and it's very common. Either you're going to see it on Zillow or Realtor.com, or perhaps you go to one of the local real estate sites in the state that you're moving to or wherever, and you start looking at the homes and the prices. And as you know, pictures can distort. I used to be a photographer. In fact, I did aerial photography, and there was a real obvious scenario where people would take a picture, the realtor take one of those little cheap cameras, that was back before digital, and they go over and they snap a few pictures of the house and makes the yard look a lot bigger because it's a wide angle lens and so on. So there's a lot of distortions in pictures, and you can expect that. When you go to look at a home, typically the camera has a little bit wide angle lens, and it might make a room appear a little bit wider and bigger than it really is. And when you actually get there and you start looking, well, that's a pretty small room there, you see. So that's one thing to look out for as far as the pictures. And the other thing is that the realtor, whoever took the pictures of the home, may not show a lot of really important things, such as details of a roof that might need some work, or some other kind of problem, or even what's next door. There's homes that are really, really nice, and then right next door there's a really eyesore of a house. So that's what helps when you get the advice of somebody who, for example, I can be a scout for somebody who might be shopping from out of town, and they say, well, here's what my specs are, and I listen to them and I find out, well, what kind of house that they might want, or property or land or whatever. And then I know my area very well, and I'll go look at all different places. And I've been in a situation where someone says, well, that looks good on a picture. I went to take a look at it. I said, no, you can't build a house there. It's not a good place. So that's the kind of thing that I can help with, and that's something to be aware of. Now, there's some major things that have to do with your house when you buy it in terms of condition, because most of the time people get a loan on a home, and the lenders require a certain amount of, they want to know what they're putting their money into. So there's inspections that need to be done, and there's town codes and so on that have to be met. For example, in particular with septic systems. In the countryside where I live, a lot of homes have a private septic system, and a good, well-maintained septic system that isn't overwhelmed and hasn't had any problems. It can last a very, very long time. But periodically, it's good to check it. It's required when you sell a home, and you need to go take a look at it, see if it's functioning. Because if there's a crack in a tank or some problem in the septic lines, you're going to run into some serious money after you buy a home like that. But if you go in and you know that, hey, it needs a little bit of work, and maybe you know somebody who can do the work and so on, then you can bid a little differently on the home and say, well, I'll accept a little bit of the problem, but I'm going to ask for a much lower price, you see. Then there's things like chimneys you got to check out, roofing. Basements are a big problem sometimes out in the countryside. In a lot of homes, in some parts of the country, they don't even have a basement, so that's not big of an issue. But there might be an area where there's a hill, and so the water comes down and gathers around the house, and if there is a basement, then sometimes it'll leak in through the sides. So that's another thing to really go look at, because that can be very expensive if you need to repair it. There's things that are required by law. For example, if a house is built before 1978, when they used lead paint, it has to be inspected for that. There's a gas called radon that is seeping up from, it's a radioactive gas, and there's ways to ventilate a house so that that isn't a problem. But they in Virginia, requires a very special test for that. And once you know if it has a radon or not, certain areas geographically, the earth exudes this thing called radon. So that's another thing to look at. Now, when you look around a property, sometimes, for example, in some areas, there's like a house next to each other and there's maybe one driveway between the two of them. And if you look carefully on the deed, it might say that, well, a long, long time ago that someone decided, well, we need a driveway, but it's not big enough for having two driveways, so we just share the one. Or maybe it was two people a family group, and they shared a driveway for a while. So what happens is you have what they call an easement of some kind. There's various kinds of easements. Sometimes out in the countryside you see them that on tracts of land where long ago a farmer needed to cross that land to get to his 40 acres of wood lot and so on. So there's things like that that can make an issue with the transfer of a property from one to another, and they have to be kind of cleaned up and understood by all parties. For example, an easement, if it's shared by two people next to each other, then okay, it's been a long time thing, we can deal with it, but at least you have to know about it, and that's the way it is with that property. So among other things that you got to think about when you buy a house is again, the condition. There are trees that are a problem. Sometimes a tree will be near a house and it's fine now, but the first storm a big limb will come and crash on the roof, so that could be a problem. So you want to make sure that there's no tree issues. And sometimes, for example, the roots of various trees can get into the septic system or into the basement walls and cause some issues like that. So there's really practical things that you should do when you look at a property, besides just saying, oh honey, this house looks really great, look, it's got a great kitchen, let's go buy it. You might want to go check it out first. Now, that issue may not be as big an issue in some kind of suburbs where they build a lot of tract houses around the same time, and they're all in basically the same kind of condition, and nothing serious is wrong with them because they've only been on the market for 20 years or so. But in the countryside, you might get a really, really old house. In some parts of the East Coast, you might get a 200-year-old house. And then you got some serious things because the wiring there's wiring issues. And so those are kind of things that the really heavy-duty, important, expensive things that you need to check. The septic, and of course there's the well issues. And these are all covered in their normal inspections of a home that they have to be checked out. But there's subtle things that might not be technically required by the law, but again, you want to start looking around the house for any weak points, maybe the floor is sagging, and so on. So those are the kind of things to watch out for. Now, as far as the confidence, I mean, it's a good idea to have some really good idea about what you can really, really afford, because a house isn't just a mortgage payment. On top of the mortgage payment and the interest and the insurance, there's going to be things like various kinds of problems, like a tree problem or unexpected septic problem, or there's a lot of different things can happen, especially out in the countryside. So you want to have a little bit of money set aside, like maybe part of, let's say you can afford like $750 a month for a house. That's a fairly small house, but let's say you can afford that, but you're going to have some other maintenance during the year, so you might want to say, well, I can budget a housing payment for, say, more like $1,000, and if I don't use all that money, the extra money, then I can pocket it and do something and let it roll over to the next year. But it's a good idea to plan for some kind of home maintenance, and also the yard that you have to take care of and so on. So as far as yards, we can get into that in another segment, but there are things to do with property that need some attention. There's vines that grow into houses and so on, and various kinds of insects and things like that. So I try to make these videos fairly short so they're easy to get through and so on. I have a specialty in Southwest Virginia, in the Roanoke, Lexington area. I specialize in rural and farms and land and so on. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the email address that's on this website, and go to my other website, virginialandowners.com. So thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you in one another of my videos. So thanks. Bye-bye.